Let's hear from Geoffrey now.
Good afternoon, Assistant Secretary Ali and the members of this committee, at this hearing. My name is Geoffrey Winder, the Senior Manager for Racial and Economic Justice Programs at Gay Straight Alliance Network. GSA Network currently operates a network of 880 GSA clubs in California high schools and middle schools and supports 36 other state-based networks. As we know, school discipline disproportionately impacts different populations of students differently and is having devastating effects on the California students' abilities to achieve and succeed. This isn't any different for youth who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, LGBTQ. However, we have additional challenges as well. In the last decade, we've seen a significant increase in the number of students who openly identify as LGBTQ, despite continued harassment, bullying, ridicule, rejection, and violence. For example, San Francisco Unified School District reported in 2011 survey, 11% of high school students and 16% of middle school students identified as LGBTQ in 2011. And we have anecdotal evidence to suggest that this increased visibility has also led to an increase in the ways in which LGBTQ youth are punished. California queer youth continue to feel unsafe and underachieve. Data from the California Healthy Kids Survey found that students who are harassed based on sexual or perceived or actual sexual orientation are more likely to report low grades, were 3 times as likely to carry a weapon to school for defense, and were 3 times as likely to report being truant in the last month because we felt unsafe. Administrations attempting to create safer schools by utilizing a get tough on bullying or zero tolerance approach to anti-bullying efforts often punish both the victim and the aggressor in these situations, making them worse for LGBTQ students. LGBTQ youth face bias from their school administrators. This increased visibility has also led to an increase in the way in which anti-LGBTQ bias plays out in school discipline policies. In 2011, the Journal of Pediatrics reported that gay and lesbian bisexual youth are 1.4 times more likely to be suspended than their straight peers. And frankly, this is the only national survey that has ever looked at the disproportionate impacts of school discipline on LGBTQ youth. Most of what we know is either anecdotal or data from community surveys. One of the largest and most unique challenges for LGBTQ youth is being outed by our school administrators when we are in a discipline process. When this happens, LGBTQ youth face the additional risk of family rejection. 50% of youth who are outed or come out to their parents are initially rejected, and of that, 30% are forced to leave home from fear of violence from their parents. LGBTQ youth often have more stressful home lives, which add to school discipline issues. Additionally, we know that 40% of homeless youth and 40% of youth in foster care are LGBT identified. According to a 2010 report by the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform, foster youth are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. So, as well as in California, the majority of our youth in our GSAs are youth of color. For LGBT youth of color, they face the existing challenges mentioned by our other panelists, as well as the challenges I just outlined. Thus, for LGBTQ youth of color in particular, this confluence of school discipline disparities, anti-LGBTQ bias, bullying, harassment, that's leaving many LGBTQ youth failing to succeed is particularly crippling for queer youth of color. To help us understand and document this, we believe that the Office of Civil Rights and other federal agencies need to include data on sexual orientation and gender identity, as well as the different ways in which bias is playing out in bullying and harassment cases so that we can better address these in the future.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Let's go now to Brandon Serpas.
Good afternoon, Assistant Secretary Ruslan Ali and members of this hearing. My name is Brandon Serpas. I'm a queer youth activist at GSA Network, and I'd like to talk to you about my own experience and the experience of other queer youth in schools. The current model of school discipline in dealing with queer youth in general and anti-LGBTQ bullying and bias in particular is failing queer youth. In my sophomore year, a student I did not know called me the F word in a classroom. A teacher heard the slur and didn't do anything. I left in fear, shaken by the incident, and emailed a GSA Network staff member asking for help. I learned that in California, I had the right to report the incident to school officials. I reported the incident to the assistant principal and heard from the student's friends that he had been suspended for 3 days. Since this is the first time I had reported harassment, I made the assumption that this was the appropriate course of action. 3 days later, the same student was in the hallway, giving me dirty looks, and I found out that he was speaking ill about me. It was clear to me that he hadn't learned anything from his suspension, that the school's solution, send the student home for a few days and hope he stops harassing people, didn't change his behavior. I stayed away from him for the rest of the year, avoiding specific hallways and even restrooms because I remembered seeing him there. I thought about reporting the continued harassment, but was afraid that the student would be suspended again and come back even angrier. This experience helped me see the ineffectiveness of punitive discipline as a way to address bullying and harassment. If we don't educate youth who are engaging in bullying behavior by using restorative justice or social and emotional learning practices, then students like me will continue to face bullying and harassment and be afraid to go to school. My story is not unique. GSA Network solicited stories from LGBTQ youth about school discipline. One student said she was disciplined for defending herself. I was suspended after a girl was in my face, teasing me about my sexuality, and tried to block her hand from hitting me. Another student explained, I was in 5th grade. I was accused of sexual harassment for coming out, for saying I was transgender. I went to the principal's office because I wore mascara and a feather extension in my hair. The school psychologist called my mom and told her that I could not say I was transgender. They wanted me to leave the school, but I did not. I've been suspended many times, mostly for wearing eye makeup or saying I was transgender or wearing hair extensions. Other LGBTQ students reported that I was given detentions for any light form of physical touching with my significant other, hugging, holding hands, and sitting close. This was described as inappropriate behavior while heterosexual couples doing the same thing were not disciplined. I got detention, and my teacher said, if I had a choice, all the queers in this school would be out of here in a second. I was outed by my school when I wrote a note to my ex-girlfriend, and the teacher took it. The counselor told my mom I was gay. I was instructed to enroll in another school and not return to campus, effectively kicked out for organizing with other LGBTQ youth. LGBTQ youth are incredibly resilient, and we are coming out at younger and younger ages, often without the support of our families. This also leaves us particularly vulnerable to punitive and excessive school discipline and institutionalized bias. While GSA clubs and organizations like Gay Straight Alliance Network help keep LGBTQ youth in schools, it is not enough. And it shouldn't be the responsibility of young people ourselves to make schools safe, fair, and equal. We need adults in our schools to take responsibility. All students have a right to a safe, quality education and to be supported at school for being exactly who we are. GSA Network and LGBTQ youth across the state are grateful for the opportunity to participate in the Office of Civil Rights hearings on school discipline. It is vital that we expand our understanding of school discipline disparities so that it includes all targeted students. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you. I have the unique experience of being a student of Garfield High School, a teacher assistant, a teacher, a dean, assistant principal, and even principal for the summer. So I know Garfield High School in and out. Unfortunately, ever since I was a young person, Garfield High School was known for a great football team, a great marching band, but also for the drugs, the gangs, the high dropout rate, and all the other social issues that you can imagine. It was not considered a safe school. It was considered the school of Jaime Escalante, of the classic, the East LA Classic that everybody knows about, but that was it. The media was there for all the negative stories, and it was not seen as a positive place to be at. But we changed all of that. I was very fortunate to be welcomed back as an assistant principal, as an administrator, to be able to make some changes. I was very fortunate that the Los Angeles Unified School District took a proactive approach. Many of the people in this room, Nancy, Laura, Carla, Dr. Perkins, everybody, Isabel, in 2007, they said, we will implement the Discipline Foundations policy, and we will lower our suspension rates. We will make our schools safe, positive, welcoming places for all of our students. Now, at first, my reaction, I have to be honest, was, well, what do they really know about running a school? Do they realize with the gang problem, the drug problem, we need to suspend kids? But they forced us into these meetings, and we had to read this literature. They pointed out our data, in front of everyone else and kind of embarrassed us. It was quite an experience. But there was something to it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take a closer look at this. And I read the articles they gave us. I looked at the data. I saw the trends. I saw what was really going on at Garfield. And we said, okay, we're going to comply. We formed a discipline and safety committee, and we did it the Bulldog way, the Garfield way. We said, we're not going to have all these bunch of cost meeting, safety collaborative, discipline foundations this, and all these other acronyms. We were in 12 meetings a month. We're going to have one efficient Bulldog meeting, and we invited all the stakeholders, students, classified, parents, classroom teacher, out-of-classroom teacher, administration, and our community partners as well. We realized that we were suspending kids at alarming rates in that big umbrella of defiance. When you couldn't figure out what they did wrong, number 11, defiance. That's where we're going to put it, and we pushed our kids out. So we formed this committee. We began to learn from the students. We began to learn from the parents' perspective. We formalized our plans, but most importantly, we were faithful in our implementation. So what happened? Well, I went to this training one day because law enforcement was our partners, and they said, Mr. Rubalcaba, we're going to pay for this expensive training, and this wonderful presenter showed this slide. This is not the picture. I just used a stock photo, but it was a student who had murdered his parents, and after he murdered his parents, he took their vehicle and went up to a school and shot it up. It wasn't just Columbine. It wasn't just Virginia Tech. There's been violence across the nation in alarming rates every single day, and now even more so with cyberbullying. And this student made this statement, I'd rather be wanted for murder than not wanted at all. And I said, oh my God, I am contributing to that school to prison pipeline. I am pushing our kids out because we are suspending our kids. I am not supporting our kids in a positive way. And I said, enough is enough. We are going to take suspension off the menu. We are on an island. We're on an island, and we have canned food, we have a can opener, we have matches, but we don't have suspensions, okay? So we're going to figure it out. We're gonna anticipate what the pushback is. Teachers are going to say, you're undermining me, Mr. Rubalcaba. You're taking away my authority. So we trained our teachers first. We went on an online discipline referral system that the district offered us. We used the rubric that Laura created. We used all the tools that the district provided us, and we faithfully implemented them with our students, with our parents, with our teachers, with everyone. So all those problems we anticipated, we prevented them. We shared this information with our external partners. So what happened? From over 600 suspensions in 2004 to 1 suspension 2010-11 school year. 1 suspension 2011-12 school year. And guess what happened? Our API went up 75 points. How did that happen? Okay? The relationship between positive behavior supports and academic achievement is there. From a toxic culture to a positive culture, to being one of the most parent-friendly schools in the district, to being highlighted in the Associated Press, in the Daily News, not nationally, internationally, okay? To being a model for schools to follow, and Sacramento sent legislators over to Garfield High School. 20 of them flew in, said, how in the heck did you do it? People flew in from New York, people flew in from out of state, and they were actually haters. They didn't believe that we really did it. They thought, you are fudging the numbers, to not say the other word. Okay, so we opened the doors and we said, come on in, check it out. And all of those haters became believers when they saw what we were doing. Even a student pushed back. We didn't suspend him. We kept him in school. His parent came into shadow, and he said, God, Mr. Rubalcaba, just suspend me. I can't take this anymore. And somebody called me from Sacramento and said, Mr. Rubalcaba, we're using the Garfield story as the model to follow in the new legislation. Here's the data. It shows it. It's on the CDE website. You can confirm it. I showed you some pictures. Here's our philosophy. We do not have bad students at Garfield High School, only good students who sometimes make bad decisions. We need to support them. The power of love in education. I'm going to say it again. The power of love in education. When students know that you love them and you care about them, they will step up. They will meet your expectations. And we supported our parents here. We give certificates for students. I'm going to finish with this. He who opens a school door closes a prison. Victor Hugo. He who opens a positive school door closes a prison. And this diagram was created by the Discipline Foundation's policy. This is kind of created by LAUSD. Be safe, be respectful, be responsible, be positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubalcaba. Very interesting. So now we're going to be taking some questions. We have about 20 minutes or so. And I'm going to call on these community organizations to pose questions. I want to remind everybody there is a reception afterward where you can ask more questions. First, the Black Parallel School Board representative. Maybe you could identify yourself, and also if you could suggest, maybe direct your question to a particular person. And Secretary Ali is here and could answer questions, and some of our other officials. Go ahead.
My name is Carl Pinkston. I'm with the Sacramento Black Parallel School Board, and that's real dangerous when a high official comes and I get an opportunity to ask a question. So I'm going to ask this question. It's a question to Rosalind Ali, and it's also a question to Mr. Madison and McGovern. The question to Rosalind Ali has to do with the question of willful defiance. We all know that willful defiance does not work for our kids. And it's clear to us in our community that, and historically, that when Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a nice idea, supposedly a nice idea that's separate but equal, but everybody will be treated the same, didn't work out. Willful defiant was similar, a concept, in a sense, as a way of classroom management. I'd like to know whether or not the notion of willful defiant becomes a civil rights issue that needs to be changed, or what we would describe is something that fundamentally needs to change from a federal level in terms of defining what that means and taking away the discretion, and particularly in that instance.
Okay.
And the second part of my question, I'll keep it real brief. California Education Code 48900 has to do with willful defiance. It's in a process of legislation. I'd like to know from how do you feel once, if it gets changed, how fundamentally it's going to impact, because disproportionately willful defiance impacts the African American community.
Okay, Secretary Ali.
Sure, I'll certainly try and help with the first one. The idea of willful defiance and the pattern that you articulated, we see across a number of offense codes. Washington's not going to dictate what those offense codes ought to be, nor would you want us to, right? These are inherently local decisions to make. That said, when we are in districts and our investigations are intense, so for example, the one I'm about to speak with you about, second largest district in the state, we spent the better part of 6 to 8 months investigating every school except one in that district, right? Every student file, these are not quick rush to decisions when we're finding violations of Title VI, because we really do want to unpack all of these data and see what's behind them. In that particular district, and we've seen it in lots of places, the idea that offense code for willful defiance, or otherwise known as insubordination in some places, this sort of category of subjective offenses. That is, you are behaving in a way that I, as the adult, perceive fits within one of these boxes, and that discretion doesn't see students of a different persuasion's behavior fitting within one of those boxes, right? So it's those kind of subjective offense codes that we will dig into especially deeply, because you're trying to get a handle of what's in the mindset of the person doing the kind of punishing when you're doing these civil rights investigations. We have seen, not unlike insubordination, several instances across the country, and you'll see them riddled through the complaints that we have, where categories like willful defiance are especially important indicators of a kind of disparate treatment or intentional discrimination, thereby constituting a violation of the civil rights laws. It is precisely the kinds of proposals, though, put out by Cadre and others in this room that are going to actually give us the kind of information to get beneath the larger categories of suspension and expulsion, right? Getting at these kinds of offense codes, empowering community members, having leaders in APs that are really willing to tackle this is how you get at it. What I'd worry about, the last thing I'll say on this, what I would worry about is if we went to those kinds of one-size-fits-all. It's not about an offense code called willful defiance, because you'll see the same patterns in insubordination. We could get rid of all of those, and you'll see a new offense code pop out called rowdy behavior or some, right? That just relabels the problem but hides it from public purview. I also wanted to speak, if I could, to Geoffrey's question about LGBT and reporting on data. One of the new things in the civil rights data collection, as you likely know, is the reporting of instances of and students disciplined for bullying and harassment across the statutes in our jurisdiction, which is disability, which is gender, race, color, and national origin. We have also, for the first time ever, released guidance and vigorously enforced Title IX to protect LGBT students. It had not been done before. What we have realized, as in the case of Seth Walsh here in Tehachapi, California, where we went and investigated and developed a very strong resolution for that district, far too often, we don't have jurisdiction over sexual orientation. That's not going to be a surprise to you or anyone. It's a long-standing constitutional set of case law that makes it clear we don't have jurisdiction over sexual orientation. That said, in far too many instances, when members of the LGBTQ community are bullied and harassed, it's actually not about their sexual orientation. It's because they are not conforming to gender stereotypes. They're not acting like a boy enough. They're not acting like a girl enough. There's been long-standing principles in employment law that constitutes a violation of Title IX. We were the first administration that made it clear that in schools, same thing. So while we are collecting data on this more and more, while we are enforcing, not just in cases like Tehachapi, but for example in Owatonna, Minnesota, where we saw an entire district of students that had pervasively suffered from LGBT bullying and harassment, so we certainly have a lot of tools, we are using them. The president and the secretary and we have endorsed 2 bills pending through the Congress. Of course, these require congressional action, one of which both combine to exactly what you're asking. One, it requires the reporting of data based on LGBT status of students that are bullying and harassed, and 2, it gives them Title VI-like protections for the first time in history. We ought not wait. We should use everything we have, and we are. But hopefully we'll see some real traction in Congress, supported by this president, to get it done.
Thank you so much for that. And just really quickly, maybe to tie it all back together, I think for us, one of the ways that we see willful defiance really playing out is for students who are gender nonconforming, right, or not conforming to the most masculine or the most feminine stereotypes. And so often those students are also labeled as willfully defiant just because their identity is not conforming with what the school thinks should be the standard.
Thanks, Secretary Ali and Geoffrey. Great. Interesting. Let's go to the next question. We only have about 8 minutes left for questions, so try to make your question quick. The Youth Justice Coalition representative?
Hello, my name's Isabel.
Okay.
My name is Tanisha, and my question has to touch on what Rob, Eric, and some of what Tia was saying was how do we get the data to have like gender, race, ethnicity, and all that on there? And the other part of my question was how do we get school police to have a clear process on complaint officers for misconduct to review that includes youth and community representation? And my question goes to anybody that has an idea.
Okay. I think we're going to talk more. Who would like to take this question about data? Okay, Secretary Ali.
At the federal level, it is. So if you go to ocr.ed.gov, ocrdata.ed.gov, and if that's not right, you can just get it from the ed.gov website. Just go to OCR. You'll see a tool that allows you to disaggregate and cross-tabulate these data by all of the categories mentioned above. So English language learner status, all of the racial categories by subgroup, including 2 or more races where that's reported, by gender and by disability status. And disability status, for the first time ever, we've also broken that down by students that qualify for an IEP under IDEA and students under 504. We had never collected data disaggregated by that in the past.
Okay. Mr. Rubalcaba wanted to say something.
Just real quick, most school sites have, for example, LA Unified has my data. LA Unified has a school accountability report card, and most school sites have the power to collect that data, but you as a community member, as a parent, you can just go to the state website, CDE website, and there's a ton of data under DataQuest that you can look up and find what you need. The second part, just real quick, school police, you know what, they're part of the team, you guys, and we need to make sure that they come to the table so that they can hear our perspective, hear what the community has to say, but also offer some valuable input on what their experience is as well. And we found it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to educate a child. So school police is also part of that formula, and bringing them into the table, I think gives a lot more positive than negative.
Okay. Mr. McGowan, did you want to say something quickly?
Yeah, real quickly, just try to tackle both of those things. First of all, passage of a policy or a law is just a tool. And at Cadre, we believe that the right to a quality education is a human right. So that gives us a broad lens to use those tools to really organize and use those tools in a way to where we can hold schools accountable. So it's accountability piece so you asked me, will things change? Well, it'll only change if we all get together and organize around those and use those tools and to hold schools accountable.
Okay. Policy link question from Enrique Velasquez, I think.
Yeah, Enrique Velasquez.
And we only have about 5 minutes.
Sure. And this is for Mr. Rubalcaba. I'm just curious, what do you think is needed to replicate the process that you led in your school? And also, what can you tell us, what it will be necessary to involve community, businesses, and everybody so that positive changes can happen in other schools?
Good question, Mr. Rubalcaba.
Okay, in order to replicate, you have to understand that the greatest change will take place locally, as Secretary Ali mentioned. It has to come from within. It has to be organic. And each circumstance is different for each school. Now, what we did is open the doors anyone to look at what we did and take from what helps for that school site. We went to visit several schools and saw a bunch of models that were not good for us. Good for them, not good for us. We took a little bit of something from everyone, even what didn't work. We knew that an in-house suspension room for Garfield wasn't going to happen. We didn't have the resources, we didn't have this place. But what we did do effectively is we invited the students to come in, the parents to come in, the community partners to come in, everybody had to come in to know what's going on, to have a voice, to share our best practices, and I'm going to give you a concrete example. We had a problem with fights happening and kids smoking out in a particular restroom. It came from the students that said, you want to prevent fights? Then you have to have better supervision, because if we see you, we're going to think twice about doing it. And we reevaluated our supervision plan based on student input, and we made a huge difference in our supervision plan, real tight, thanks to the student input. And that's what made a difference. What I'm trying to say is you have to bring everyone in and be efficient, intentional, use the data, and put everything in writing. Don't just say. A lot of times great ideas are shared out, vocally, but it's not put in writing. You want to be able to refer back to a document that everyone agreed upon.
Thank you so much to our panel. Let's give them a round of applause. Great job.